Hey,
Melissa,
Randy.
hello.
Randy,
How are
hello.
you?
I'm doing fabulous.
Good to see you, and thanks for joining me and doing this. I'm really excited to chat with you, and we always have great conversations. So I know this is gonna be a lot of fun.
I've
Um,
been watching your interviews, but I have to say that that's my favorite background by far.
well, I had to pick one that was fitting, and earlier this morning I was like, "What am I going to put up there?" And I was like, "Well, she's into fishing, which obviously Catch Your Limit's the name of your business, and I know you and your husband are
That's our logo.
That's your logo, which is fantastic. And I was like, well, one of the greatest fishing experiences of my life was when I went to Alaska and I caught salmon. And so there you have
I'm
it.
jealous.
Yeah, that was fantastic. That was like the best day. That look on my face was the entire day.
It's awesome.
Yeah, great experience. So in any case, let's chat a little bit. You have been pivoting your business like most other companies. You've done a lot of live training, and I've participated in many of those. So tell us, well, first, let's back up, but tell us a little bit about who you are, just for those who don't know you, a little bit about your business and what you do, and maybe we'll lead from there into what you're doing today and how we're going to pry some information out of you today to help us.
Okay, so my husband Tom and I created Catch Your Limit 20 years ago. So this is our 20th anniversary. And we specialize in working with leaders to help guide and grow leaders. So that can be developing a custom leadership strategy. Oftentimes everyone says they want leadership, but when you really get into, okay, what's the strategy behind it? What are the investments behind it? How are you going to measure that? It's just a hope, not a strategy. So we help with that. Custom plans, do strategic planning, work with boards, leadership teams. And then some of what you've seen me do is, we also speak and facilitate at conferences and those kind of things. So when all of this hit, I was sort of prepared for what happened after the recession in '08. I was just sort of prepared for everything to kind of cancel. And interestingly enough, everything just sort of transitioned to virtual. And that has been a great experience. There's, learning a lot about the capabilities and what's working and what's not. So just kind of in a learning mode and feeling like I'm learning new stuff every day.
Yeah, I mean, when we were just chatting, you're right. This happened suddenly. I think it was the fastest recession and recovery by a long shot. Although, a lot of the recovery is due to the fact that the Fed pumped trillions of dollars into our economy. So, we're being propped up by that. But so you had expected everything to just stop. All training stuff usually gets cut off, and is it discretionary spending? I mean, is that what it's bundled into?
Yeah, I think people know that they need it during times, but it is considered, I think, by a lot of leaders, nice to have, not have to have. Plus, I think crises in general, or sense anything that's creating a sense of urgency, rallies people. And so, a lot of the energy and what's happening, I think, is that people did come together around a common goal. And so, in that case, people are actually more kind of higher functioning. And so, I think people are kind of riding that wave for a while. So, yeah, we kind of anticipated that a lot of things would be canceled, and I'm still sort of waiting for that to happen. I'm getting some indications that some things that might be considered optional, like staff surveys next year,
Right.
going in and doing some staff development work is no longer a priority. But what we're seeing things pick up are in the areas of working with leadership teams to really focus.
Mhm.
Focus is really important. Are we all clear on our priorities? Because you are trying to manage remotely. So really prioritization, making sure leadership teams are aligned, and then plan update. So a lot of people operate on strategic plans or have really good plans, but this has definitely made them want to take a second look. And I think sometimes people try to do that on their own, but then they can get into some areas where it might be more helpful to have a facilitator. And that's where we've seen an uptick.
And you said a minute ago, hope isn't a strategy, and I think a lot of people are hoping uh, for a lot of things. So so that's kind of the next thing. So a lot of my employees are working from home now. I've come back to the office. I'm encouraging to come back, and I've got a few that have inconsistently come back. And I'm wondering, am I making a mistake by not doing an all or nothing, or is it better to try to slowly test the waters? Because we transitioned to working remotely pretty easily. There was a little bit, it was all of a sudden we're helping everybody transition to the same format, but we were very, it was easy for us, and we had done it in the past, and we were already all set up for it. It wasn't an experiment for us. So I don't know, what's my question here? So I don't even know if you have the answer, but what should it be? I mean, should it be to continue to work remotely? I'm afraid that we're going to get stuck in this position. In fact, in a lot of ways, my employees are saying, we kind of like this. We're working great. The communication is more. They're talking to each other more often, more regularly. I'm not, but I'm not involved in the operational part of the business.
So why are you afraid you're going to get stuck?
Yeah, I don't know. Well, I do know that. So for me, I know this isn't a long-term strategy, in the fact that our culture is so important to us. And if I was going to onboard a new employee, which is something we want to do in the near future, we want to bring a new employee on. I don't know how he or she is going to learn the Sklar way if there's nobody we don't have we don't have videos and training material. I mean, we have a format for onboarding. We have some video, we have some training, but a lot of it is just learned through working and doing the things and hearing other conversations and hearing how other people are supporting our clients. And it's kind of a backward way of IT support here. A lot of people in IT support are burdened and bothered and by people calling in with problems, and we take a completely different approach. And so if we brought a new employee who had that old way and the typical way, we want to be like, no, that's not right. But there's nobody here to monitor their conversations.
So I think you're touching on something that it's definitely a conversation that we're having with so many clients and friends of ours who are leaders. And a couple of things. I don't think that right in the moment is the time to try to set a long-term policy. And the reason I say that is there's just still so much uncertainty. And so I'm really focused on trying to help people maximize their resources. And I'm a little concerned that if any of us try to set another policy for the next few months and then it changes again, what did we really go through that effort for? It's just time. And so I'm encouraging people to start documenting, to start having conversations around what is working for us virtually, what's not working as well. Because if out of this, there's going to be some kind of hybrid model, then I think it makes sense to have some strategy behind that hybrid model. What makes sense to have face-to-face? What makes sense for onboarding? What makes sense you can shadow people on virtual meetings with clients and things too. So it's just being intentional about who do I need to loop in on this so that they're learning and observing. Are there things that we could record that all of a sudden, because we're having interactions on Zoom so much, so it's like, hey, talk to a client. So do you mind if I record this conversation for training purposes? There's all kinds of things that I think we could be creative around. Everyone's business is different. So I'm encouraging people to really approach this with a degree of curiosity. What's working, what's not, why could it, what should we never go back to doing the old way again? Because I think what's exciting is around some kind of hybrid model and figuring out productivity and what works for different people in different roles. Every role's not the same. So I just think be intentional versus just having a return to work. I know there's a lot of resentment is the best way I would describe it right now. People are being asked to return to work, even though important details in our society have not been worked out, like childcare,
right,
education. So you want me to come back to work from mid-July through September 1st, not knowing if I need to go back home. So I think a lot of it can be busy work, a lot of it can be noise. And if people are productive and it's working, I think be grateful.
yeah. Well, and we have had some issues with around the employees with young children, but very, very little. But I can imagine that would be, my children are older, and, they wanted me to make lunch and dinner and stuff, and that would conflict with whatever work I was doing while I was at home. But more than anything, I was doing these interviews and I was bothering them and they wanted me to leave.
Yeah.
um, that's some interesting points you just made there. And I was encouraging my employees even a little more than a year ago to start recording when they help somebody fix an issue, was to record it. And then let's document this into some sort of knowledge base, and create like a library. And they were all saying, well, first of all, it's nerve-wracking. If you're not used to recording yourself, certainly going live is intimidating for a lot of people. And I understand that. But the fact is that they're all sitting back there in close quarters, and they're like, I don't want to bother the person in the cubicle next to me, with recording, because I guess they felt like they would have to talk louder. And so there was some pushback. But now that they're at home and isolated and they're not bothering anyone, I wonder if it's an interesting thought. And if we recorded more of how we help people, it might help onboard a new employee. Is that what you're saying? That there would be more?
Yeah, I think I was just giving that as an example, but really strong cultures are guided by values or behaviors. And this is the way we do things around here. That's really what values are about. And if they're clear and you're effectively managing in alignment with those values, I really believe that does come across virtually. I think that how we behave, the experience we want to create for our customers, how we talk with one another, how we are intentional with one another, how we give feedback, all of those things to me haven't changed.
Well, I said it earlier, so much of what we do here is our way, and it's different. It's unique, comparable to what I've experienced in the past. I mean, I always thought when I was coming up in this company and I saw the people who were ahead of me and the way they were acting towards customers and how they were treating customers, I was just like, it just seemed so backwards. It seemed so resistant. It seemed so typical, like the old Saturday Night Live skit, just move out of the way, and we don't want that. We want to encourage our customers to call. We love it when they call. We're in the business of, fast call, 10, 15-minute quick fixes, which requires them to call early into their issue. And our whole business model is designed around that to take away all the friction there. And then we overhear these conversations, and then we can interject afterwards and say, hey, I heard you were talking to this person and you handled it this way. In the future, you might want to do that. And that's just gone. And you're saying maybe it doesn't have to be.
Well, I'm saying that maybe there are other ways than the traditional way of empowering someone and having that person demonstrate the behavior that you're looking for.
Yeah.
And so that they earn more trust and those kind of things. I think we can get creative. And yeah. I think if anything, that's what I'm loving about what's happening is for so long, people could have thought differently. Like, right, we've had this technology for a decade or more or whatever, but we weren't utilizing it. And now I think if this teaches us to stop and say, what are we trying to accomplish and why are we doing it that way? And is there another way? I am right now communicating with a lot of people who have in-person meetings planned. And I've had some recent experiences over the last couple of weeks that I'm really challenging them, like, why? Because tell me what you want about in person. And of course they say, well, we want to be face-to-face. Well, okay, can you do that with masks? Is everyone comfortable? Does it create actual division of those people who are more cautious versus less cautious? Like, what are we really doing and why? And so I think I don't have the answers, right. But I think the pause to say, let's be strategic. And oftentimes I observed in my work, I always feel the pressure to, when I walk into a room, like say it was yours, like say it's a staff retreat for you, what every person there is worth to your company. And the value of those folks in a room together for X amount of time. And so I always feel the responsibility of, man, I better make it worth that investment. And I think sometimes if people within the companies had that same mindset, we wouldn't have a lot of the meetings we have, or they'd be a heck of a lot more productive or shorter. So please, I don't think it's perfect. And I definitely believe in face-to-face as much as anyone else, but I don't think we can will what we want to be reality right now. The numbers aren't going in that direction. And so we all need to be prepared for continued disruption, whatever that looks like.
And to your point, if you said, hey, Randy, let's meet, here are your options. We could do this, what we're doing now, which is great. I mean, I feel like we're having a very typical, normal conversation. We're just not physically in front of each other. Or we could be physically in front of each other. One or both of us will be wearing a face mask. So the expressions on your face, and when you're telling me something and I'm confused, but I'm not wording the words that say I'm confused, and you have to read my facial expression, but you can't see it. I think this is probably preferable. And
right now. Yeah, and I have been really surprised at how vulnerable people have been willing to get. Now, what I don't know is how much of what's working right now is sort of, like you do a lot of things around creating a culture of fun and relationship building. I mean, before all this happened, you were taking Fridays for team building, every Friday, for just working together as a team and building those relationships and having fun and letting off steam. So you've been putting a lot of deposits into a bank account around relationships and culture. And so I think you're probably riding that wave a little bit. I don't know that it's the same for people who weren't doing that. And I think at first, I think they saw a lot of functionality. But I am hearing and observing that, those problems or issues or lack of investment may not be stretching as far. Now even though I say that, I don't think that means that we can't be intentional and build relationships. So I'm having a lot of good experiences with people I had never met before, prospects on Zoom. So someone refers us, we have a Zoom call, usually a phone call first, then a Zoom call. So several projects over the next 6 months are completely virtual. I've never met the folks in person. And in terms of the relationship, I think the relationships are building and progressing just like they normally would. Right. I do feel that there are some inefficiencies with virtual sessions that I get. An example would be, if you're with a group for a day, you get some momentum going and you get a lot accomplished. Right. And if you're able to engage people in that kind of format with Zoom or Teams or whatever you might be using, and breaking those down into smaller sessions. And so there are pros and cons, but I'm pleased with the vulnerability. And I think important things should still be happening, like individual check-ins. I have one client who their folks are really telling me that they're having more time with their manager than they've ever had, because those managers aren't traveling all across the region. They're not in as many meetings. So they feel like they're growing and learning and developing and getting coached way more. I have really been encouraging people to continue, if not up the one-on-ones, and not be afraid to have accountability conversations. And I think those are even working okay.
You're right. The got-a-minute meetings where somebody that's, 20 feet away from me can just pop in my office unannounced and say, hey, and then fill in the blank. Those are gone. And so, somebody like me who has a short attention span, I have been able to get a lot accomplished at home and uninterrupted work, I guess get into that state of flow where I can go into deep thought uninterrupted. This other thing that was sort of becoming a thing, I guess it still is, the Zoom fatigue. I mean, is there some truth to that, or was that just an adjustment, or was that just all the stresses of the world combined with this new adjustment of being on video with people?
I think it's all of the above. I did read, I think it was in New York Times, and it was an excellent article that says that our brains are overworking on Zoom because they're looking for the micro signals and facial movements around our eyes and our mouth, and Zoom takes those out
Oh,
and can't keep up the same real time that it's face to face. So there is some scientific, according to this article,
yeah.
evidence that our brains are working harder to try to pick up on those signals than they would have to in person.
Okay.
But I also just think we're fatigued. We're fatigued by everything. We're anxious. We're worried. There's a lot of grief. There's grief if you know of someone who has been personally touched by COVID or the economy or police brutality or name it, you're grieving. If you are just outside of your norms, your kids aren't going to see their grandparents this summer or go to camp, or they don't get to play their sport or whatever that is, that's grief. So I think over time, when you recognize this sense of loss, it can be tiring.
I definitely understand. And, the most tiresome thing initially was the fact that I had the uncertainty. I didn't know, all you had to go by, which was being told to you by the television, and I don't want to dive into that, but I have these young teenagers and young adults in my house who, for the most part, were being told that it's not going to affect them. And they were like, I don't see why we are doing all this. And, it's like every day I had to work against that. And so that's kind of died off, and they're adjusted, everybody's adjusted, and we're moved back to a more normalcy, and there's a lot less concern. But yeah, all right. So and then, back to your point about building my culture and my team, one of the things that I remembered as an employee, I haven't been an employee in something like 20 years. And so
I've never been one, so think about that. I mean,
yeah, right?
I wasn't, like I was for like odd jobs, part-time jobs, but I started this company right out of college.
Good for you, and I wish I had, I had my own businesses and stuff, but when I became, an employee here working, this was my dad's company, it was tough, and he really put up with a lot from me, and I was never good. I'm not an employee. I'm just not a good employee. I never will be one. And I felt bad for anybody who had to manage me because I know it was frustrating. But in any case, never wanted to lose touch with how it felt to be an employee, like to get only 1 or 2 weeks of time off. And so I adopted to, as you know, a lot of this, really nice benefits, like 5 weeks of personal time off.
It's incredible.
Right. And is it incredible? It seemed right. It seemed fair, because 2 weeks, I mean, especially if you're young kids, you can lose 2 weeks through just getting, they go to school, they get some sort of, cold or virus and they bring it back. I mean, I can remember for 10 years, I was just constantly sick. Nothing comparable to what we're dealing with now, but, and so 2 weeks was nothing really. And so I was like, I want to do better. And then at one of the events, one of the Council of CEOs events,
I was there. I
Harold,
remember that conversation.
Cameron
And
Harold,
remember how controversial it was. And I don't know. I'd love to know how many people actually took it back and did it. Like, I know you did, but I haven't heard anyone else.
I haven't either. He came back and he did that same thing again. And again, it was only a few of us that stood past 5 weeks, and only one was past 6 weeks. And I thought, we need to go to 6 weeks because I want to be the best of the best. And that's when we started the Friday afternoon things. I want to do something a little different. And you're right. Talk about putting money in a bank, culture money, I guess, whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
Because we broke some really big barriers. There's some very strong personalities, some very intelligent people by design that we brought into this business. And by design, they're going to have their own opinions, very strong opinions. And I can remember one particular thing we did a tubing trip down the James together. And, you're trapped, you're stuck together. There's no devices because we didn't bring our cell phones.
Yeah.
And we're just talking. And then we had to navigate around, something, and we had to help each other get out of the water and pull each other out. That one trip made the biggest difference. And I'm so glad that I did that.
You created space and time to get to know each other as human beings.
Yes.
And one of the things we say is like, what is wrong? Like, why can't we embrace bringing humanity into our workplaces?
Yeah.
Because everyone wants to talk about trust and team building. Well, you've got to make the time and space to see each other as humans, to know we're not the same, but, we're both, interesting, and we both have our own challenges, and we both have different things, but we both bring things to the table. And that's what a team is all about. And so one of the things, whether it's in person or virtual, that I think people do not take enough time for is to create that space, to create that opportunity, to give people permission to play, to give people permission to be people. We were just on another Zoom call before this, where it's a leadership program that we facilitate. We've had to pivot it to virtual. It's an annual program, and we did just a check-in, like, how are you doing? And it's amazing how many sessions it takes for people to really get raw and to be really vulnerable about this is what's happening to me right now. But that kind of connection is so important, and it will get you through so much, and that matters. So I think it's the big things that you've been doing, but I'm also really impressed by the Friday evening meals.
Mm-hmm.
So tell people about that, because I know about it, but
Well,
I think it's a little thing that means the world right now.
well, and I would love more ideas, and I have to credit my friends that I talked to. We were talking weekly, that own businesses and talking about ways. And so you're right. I mean, so we cut out the Friday, once a month Fridays, that we would do half a day together to go play. And I felt bad that we weren't doing that, because I don't know how you do stuff like that socially distant, and just the criteria of doing things together was just a challenge. So I felt, I was cooking a lot of dinner. You can only order Panera so many times before it gets old. And, I have 3 kids, and sometimes I get an additional one, a boyfriend or somebody comes to over for dinner. And I'm really like getting frustrated with cooking all the time. And I'm thinking, boy, my employees are probably feeling this too. And so one of my friends said, we're buying dinner on Friday nights for the employees. And so we started doing that. And, it was a huge hit, and they loved it. And, and I tell them, don't do dishes tonight. You get to, when you cook dinner, the cooking is, to me, is not the problem. It's the cleanup and, putting, everything back together and making a big mess in your kitchen. That's
And
not,
the delivery of this food is not the thing. It's the fact that you care enough to say, you've got a lot on your plate. I can't take all that away, but I can make one thing easier for you.
thing.
That's tremendous.
I appreciate. I try to just think like inward, like, what is it like to do dishes every night? Well, I hate it. It's my least favorite thing in the world, probably.
Who taught you to be that conscientious and thoughtful?
Who did?
Yeah.
I would probably credit, my parents, but my mother is very self-aware, I guess, or very in tune with other people's feelings, for better or worse. My dad is an incredible judge of character. I can remember, him handling things, and, I would say probably a little bit of both of them. Probably both of them have a high awareness. And I try so hard to be a very good listener. And I would say I'm a lot better today than I used to be. And doing these interviews, ironically enough, has made me a better listener. I keep notes while you're talking so that I don't have to stop listening, but I won't forget the thing that came to my mind.
Well, what you're doing is, I think, the most important thing about leadership. You're modeling great leadership behavior. You're modeling empathy. You're modeling caring. And so you're creating this space in your culture. And I think what people so often forget is they have these expectations of the kind of leaders they want, but there's no modeling going on. And so I think being intentional about that is so rare, and it's really powerful. And what people don't want a perfect leader. They don't expect someone to be perfect all the time. They don't even really want someone to be like super nice. They just want them to be fair and consistent, and be clear. Clear, fair, and consistent. If you know what you're going to get, then most people can pretty much get behind you.
Well, and so thank you for all of the compliments. I don't know that I consider myself a great leader, but I think if I had a strength, it is maybe getting the most out of other people that, I'm, working with. So back to the thing earlier that we were talking about is I'm really frightened. I say not frightened, I'm concerned that I'm going to lose all of that we had been investing in with the 5 weeks of personal time off. I mean, a lot of the things that we came up with was based on a questionnaire, like, what is the one thing you hate to do? And, some of the women in the office were like, well, I hate cleaning my office. And some people were like, well, I hate, spending Saturdays getting my oil changed. So I was like, well, great, we'll change your oil for you. I have an arrangement with Bill Tally Ford. They come up once a quarter. They change the oil in all of our personal vehicles and in our company vehicles. And so you don't have to go do that. And so I'm giving back some time with the family. So family is a big part of our culture. Being connected with your family, giving that opportunity to have that family time is really what I'm after, which is why, the PTO, which is near and dear to me. I had a disruptive event in my life. I went through a divorce, and it made me realize that maybe I wasn't connected as deeply and as intentionally with my family. And even though I didn't have my marriage, but I had my relationship with my kids, and the richness of that relationship because of having gone through that event has, created that part of our culture, because I don't want to see anybody else here go through that, and I don't want to see them miss the opportunity, like get older and go, wow, I wish I had taken my kid on that trip, or I wish I had gone to that kindergarten thing, but I didn't want to use my PTO time for that when and so, it's just through experiences. The other thing I always have learned, and this is something I've discovered on my own, is to treat the company like another person. A lot of people probably think I represent Sklar Technology, which I do. But anybody who says, can I have this day off, or should we give this raise, or should we give this bonus, or should we do that? The first thing I think is, well, let me separate myself from the company and think, what would it say? You know, and I do this a lot with myself. Like, if I feel like I'm not contributing enough to the business, I think, well, what would it say to me? You're being selfish. You're not trying hard enough. You're not fill in the blank. Anyways, I just kind of went on a tangent.
Well, no, I mean, it kind of inspired me. I mean, I think we all need to have a lot of grace right now. Like, I think part of what's made you so successful is you've been looking out. We talked about you've been preparing to be recession proof. You've been preparing the culture. And I think that is for those of us who are ambitious and productive, we're always in that forward mode. And I think that's valuable. But I also think right now, giving ourselves a bit of a grace. We're going through a pandemic, a global pandemic there is no roadmap. And just we're doing, getting through this is actually success. And so I think the pause, if you want to call it that, it can be scary and uncertain because it's creating slowdown for us to think about things differently, but that might not all be bad. And so one of the things that you said about family time has been this major motivator for you in building your culture and your company. If that's your true north and you keep that your true north, then you lead the same discussions you led when everybody was in the office with now. Like, what's working, what's not, what do you need? How do we make sure we keep this? And where you're going to get those answers is going to be from your team, because they want to keep it as much as you do.
Yes, they do.
And so you're going to get all kinds of great intel when you have those kind of conversations and make them a part of it. And hold people accountable to the culture. Don't be afraid to set the bar high, just because, we're virtual. And yeah, maybe this isn't the time while people have a billion things going on to have the same, productivity standards in all cases, but it's also not a time to not be personally accountable to the things you need to do too. So there's a fine line, but if you know your people, then it's going to be easier to navigate. Those people who haven't had real heart-to-hearts with their folks and now are like popping in on Zoom to have some major conversation, yeah, that's probably awkward. Yeah. But why is it awkward? It's not because of the pandemic, and it's not because of Zoom. It's because they didn't invest in the relationship prior to all this.
That's great. It's reflective, and hearing you say that, and I'm listening to you and I'm pondering, if a core part of our culture is having these enriched family, these opportunities to connect with your family more, and working from home more frequently is enabling that, um, then maybe it was a part of the way we do things around here that should have been adopted sooner. And I've never said to anybody that they had to come. I've encouraged people to come join me. It's awfully lonely up here by myself.
Yeah,
Uh,
I have some clients who are doing some waves of returns, and that seems to be going really well. And it's all based on sort of options. And some people are returning back to work because that's where they're more productive. Other people are returning to work because they have been they're single, they've been completely alone all this time. They just need to hear other noise around them. And so
yeah,
everyone has different motivators. So that's why I don't think it's one size fits all.
right,
And I asked a group the other day, I was doing kind of an icebreaker in a beginning of a full day session, and it was actually in person, socially distanced, which is a whole other experience. And I said, what was your kind of guilty pleasure, fun thing so far working from home? And at some point at the end of that, I said, I wish I could take all this away. And several of them were like, no, 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 we love it. We didn't mean to give you that impression. I said, what do you mean? And to your point, Randy, they said they've never all had 3 meals together as a family this many times ever.
right.
They have, they had not transitioned some of the collective chores, and like certain people did things, but to actually pitch in and be a team in the house, they hadn't done that the same way. Those are skills and lessons and valuable experiences that for all the things we're missing, we might be gaining some
You
really
know,
great things.
I actually agree 100%. The eerie feeling I got initially when I was staying home so much and spending so much time at the house, which was not nowhere near my normal. I'm always on the go. I live out of a bag. I mean, I don't have a place that I stay out longer than, I would say, 4 days in a row in my previous life, if you want to call it that now.
Pre-COVID.
Yeah. But growing up, we didn't go anywhere. I mean, we would go camping once a year out in the Eastern Shore as a family, but otherwise, we stayed around the house. And so it was sort of like a deja vu for a while. I was like, this feels weird. Like I've done this before. And I was like, oh, this is how I grew up. And,
Yeah.
my kids never really, I guess when they were really young, but only my son might remember those days when we stayed around the house. But otherwise, they've been going back and forth. I'm divorced, so they go back and forth to their mom. So they don't stay in one place that long. Um, and so the other thing is that, if we're going back in time, sort of doing a reset, like I don't remember growing up and knowing that there was this many restaurants. And I hate the idea that a restaurant will go out of business.
Mm-hmm.
But it'll certainly limit, I mean, take home, carry. I guess there was Domino's would deliver, but it wasn't that many options. I mean, you could literally call any company and they'll deliver. I guess that'll always be around.
I
It's
think what
just,
I miss is the creativity, like to talk about the businesses that are hurting so much right now.
yeah,
Like I miss seeing the creativity and what's the next thing that they're going to come out with on the menu. And yeah, so I think everything is thing. I guess it's possible. And when everyone tries to paint things as one thing or another, if anything, this has been the great, example of and.
yeah.
It's sad, it has a downside, and it has some really important, nice things too. And that's okay. They can mutually exist.
Yeah, I mean, innovation seems to be the big thing that, well, it's always a huge thing for us. I mean, if we're not coming out with something to add to our service program or to the way we help our customers secure their data or how they become more efficient or fill in the blank, then I feel like we're really failing. And I would say I have been personally creative in some of my marketing, obviously doing these Facebook Lives. I wasn't doing these prior to. But as far as part of our offering and creating value, that's, I think, a missing part right now. And so you just gave me the realization that I probably need to be, I was talking to one of my engineers this morning about a service that's up for renewal and that is part of it. And I said, we can't do away with it. Our customers highly depend on it. It's a very big part of our offering. but what else are we adding to it? What are we plugging in to this value that we're offering? That hasn't happened. So are companies all struggling with that, or is that sort of a Randy problem?
I don't think it's a Randy problem. I think it just depends. I think some companies have seen opportunity and acted very fast, very quickly, and are, have pivoted, or whatever you want to call it. I used to love that word, and now I'm not so sure.
Never liked
And
it.
then I think other folks are able, maybe it's longevity or reserves or whatever, to sit back a little and watch a little bit longer and try to put together a very thought out strategy. And so some people have to just, either they're quick to market or they have to be, and then other folks can think about it longer. And then I really do believe that there are a lot of folks that aren't, at least from what I'm hearing, are not willing to change. And so they keep wanting to run with the same playbook. Like, well, this is how we did things. And it's almost like they're willing it to be the way that they're going to continue to get revenue. And their employees are saying, well, shouldn't we have some contingency plans? Or what if this happens? Or what if that happens? Nope, this is what we're doing. And I do wonder, as much as I appreciate the drive and the strong-willed nature of that, I do wonder how strategic that is, given all that we're experiencing,
Pushing through
and
it.
whether or not that's just gonna put resources in the wrong direction, put them on things that aren't going to work, and then what are you going to be left with?
I wrote the word playbook down, and you're right about what you were saying earlier, documenting, because if we document, then this is potentially a playbook for the next future disaster, which there's certainly going to be one. I mean, there's always going to be economic disruptions. They happen every 8 to 10 years. Put them in your plan, know they're going to happen. In fact, before this happened, there was already the belief that we were going to go into some sort of recession or major economic downturn. You see Warren Buffett, cashing out, and he's building his war chest, getting ready. And then this wasn't the thing that we thought would happen, but it happened. The other thing is today's July 1st. It's the first day of the quarter, or is this a new quarter, or is this the second month?
No.
This is a new quarter. This is the 6-month mark. We're in the middle of the year.
Yes.
And normally I would have, and it just made me realize I have a 1-page strategic plan that I fill out every quarter, and I think about it. And I've been listening to these companies, give guidance and what they're, these big corporations on what they believe, and they can't. A lot of them are saying, we don't know, it depends on, and then there's a bazillion things you could say. And I haven't even gone through the process of it myself, not even intentionally, but I don't know what I would put in there, because you're right. I mean, the old way isn't what's working right now.
But we know one thing for certain, and we know that disruption is certain.
It is.
And so you can create, it's weird, but you can actually find some stability in that. As long as things are this uncertain, what are the things we can control? What are the things we can do? Yeah. And I find that to be a really meaningful exercise, stabilizing enough, even though the stabilization is lack of stability. It sounds crazy, but I'm doing some strategic planning right now where we're really looking at a phased approach. And the first phase is literally, we don't know how long it's going to be. It is marked by the criteria of the environment around us. And what are the indicators that we're getting into some sort of a different phase? Right. And when can we start thinking long-term again? And so helping people think through scenario planning versus just linear kind of thinking is helpful.
I'd love to see, what you come up with there. That would be great. I'd be willing to participate as a, part of be a lab rat or whatever you want to call it.
Okay.
I run a small business. I've got I think your businesses that you help are primarily a little larger, but, or am I wrong? Is that?
It just depends. Over the years, it would be easier if we specialized in a certain category or size, but it really comes down to a leader and whether or not they are, they care, whether or not they really care about the people, and whether they're investing back into the company. If they see the company as just the primary purpose is to generate wealth and that it's not about sharing that and reinvesting in that and developing people and developing a team, they're probably not a good candidate. So
Right.
that's why great clients for us are great people. It's not about their business or their size.
Yeah, I would agree. I could probably tell within the first 30, 40 seconds if this is going to be a good fit relationship. I understand what you're saying. Okay. You really helped me iron out some clarity, really. It's irony, this is like we just had like a counseling session. People going through childcare and homeschooling, I can't imagine. We kind of touched on that.
Imagine being the teachers, like a kindergarten teacher. Tom's daughter is a kindergarten teacher. I'm like, how do you engage kindergartners over this platform? She does it, but I don't know how.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's interesting because I don't have anybody that I know that has a kid that young. I'm not a teacher. I've never been a good teacher. Like I can remember at a young age, my daughter saying, "Will you read this book to me?" And within 30 seconds, I literally would put myself to sleep. It was terrible, and I wasn't great at school to begin with. So who am I to teach them? Luckily, my kids are very smart and don't need my help at all, and never really have. But how are we expected when school starts to homeschool, have a full-time job at home with these little, I mean, is there any guidance? Is there anything that you've discovered there through some of your research?
So I think back to helping, what you can do as leaders is be clear on what are the priorities. What are the must-haves? What are the nice-to-haves? What are the things that, if these things don't get done, we're going to be okay. But these are the critical things, and being on the same page about that so that when people are distracted or have to make a split-second decision, okay, I've got 15 minutes, what can I work on, or an hour, or whatever it is, that they're clear on where to put their time and that it's in alignment with the overall firm strategy. So I think, one, being clear on priorities. Two, being clear on expectations. What is reasonable that you think, and having that conversation, not just saying this is what I expect, and really a lot of touch bases, those one-on-one check-ins. How are things going? How can I help? What can I do? Encouraging people to ask for help when they need it. I think part of the isolation is that you might feel like it's all on you to do, but we still need to function as a team, and sometimes that means asking for help. And I also think that it's important to think about long-term value of the relationship for both the employee and the employer. This is going to pass. And, back to a little bit of grace and a little bit of recognizing we're all doing the very best we can. And is the net contribution to this work family a positive one? Maybe this week it wasn't your best week. Maybe a child got sick. Maybe this happened. But overall, are you a contributor? Are you a thought leader? Are you bringing value? And I think kind of having a long-term view is a little bit more helpful than, someone's missed the last 2 meetings. So checking in, being empathetic, but really understanding and giving people a safe space to share with you what's going on in their new office or home worlds without feeling like they're just going to be, I think people are afraid sometimes to be vulnerable because they don't want to be considered weak as the weak link and be let go. And so, in a time where people are focused on stability, financial stability, I think people are scared, even if they don't say it. And so it's a delicate balance. And I think the best leaders right now are listening. They are just talking and listening and trying to put themselves in other people's shoes and having empathy and just trying to have a long range view right now.
Yeah, that's good. It's sort of a realization, we've never been a group of lots of meetings and scheduled meetings. We're very much just a cohesive, collaborating, we just work together. And so if we were having a meeting, we would say, well, why were we having a meeting?
Yeah.
If we had an issue that required a meeting, we would have already discussed it, as a group or one-on-one. You give me a lot to think about. I think I have more questions than answers, but they're new questions. Scott over at the council, he does these square tables. Have you ever participated in any of those?
I don't think I've participated in a square table. I have helped kick off some of the roundtable conversations and spoken at the conference, but I love the square table concept.
I do too, and I've never participated in one, admittedly so. But this topic of could become a really good one. I wonder if they've covered it yet. And I learned so much from other business owners that are, we're all in some way or another working either stressed together at an office because we have to, because we're doing manufacturing, whatever, or they're like our company where we're all working remotely. And, I kind of felt like I was lucky that we could do it then. And more so recently, I'm feeling maybe I'm not the lucky one because now I've got employees that may never want to come back. In fact, many of them have expressed that to me, like, we're going to have a hybrid approach. And I'm like, uh-oh, what have I created?
Don't be afraid. Embrace the possibility.
Embrace the possibility.
Embrace the possibility. And that doesn't mean that doesn't mean free reign. I think there's a lot of promise there, particularly around your culture and family time and your way of doing things. But that doesn't mean that you have to lower your expectations.
Well, and whenever I express the reasons why I am worried about that, it always goes back towards, a degradation of what we've built on or the potential of onboarding a new employee.
Yeah.
That'll still
engage your team. They'll have really great ideas.
And I've asked the 2 or 3 that have come to me on it. I've pitched it back to them, and I did it in a way of like, okay, I'm fine with it. I actually kind of like working from home too, but what would Sklar Technology say? Like if it had a voice, would it say, well, how the hell are we going to add new employees or, Yeah.
And when you have this next onboarding process, if it is virtual, because it might have to be, and other people are doing it. That's the thing is we could probably have a whole session on virtual, having a panel discussion about virtual onboarding and hiring. And I know people who have been interviewed, hired, and onboarded since COVID started. I think that could be a deep dive topic.
Definitely. Well, we might be in touch with you.
Okay, sounds good. I appreciate it. Enjoyed the conversation.
I did too. I thank you so much. You've given me so much to think about. If you would watch the comments, typically somebody might ask something in the comment section and I'm not fit to answer it. It's your area of expertise. If you could just kind of keep an eye on that, I would appreciate it.
Will do.
I look forward to seeing you Zoom or in person in the near future.
Yes, I'm going to be optimistic.
And send my best to Tom. And
I will.
And have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Randy.
All
Bye.
Right. Bye, Melissa.